Republican Representative Matt Gaetz believes that voters should be armed when they go to the polls. Can you guess which voters you would prefer to have armed? Now, let me give you some details here. During a recent House Judiciary Committee meeting on the Protecting Our Kids Act, that's a bill that's been proposed after the mass shooting in Uvalde, Texas. We've had like 20 mass shootings since then, but that's where 19 children and 2 adults were killed by an 18-year-old gunman. And so that's, of course, why the bill would raise the minimum age to purchase certain firearms from 18 to 21, require firearms to be stored in a lockbox or other safe storage, and tries to prevent gun trafficking. Notably missing is an assault weapons ban, of course. Nonetheless, these very modest, and I think they're modest, gun control measures were too much for Republicans. And they turned the hearing into an absolute clown show. You had, of course, Louis Gohmert, Thomas Massie, and Matt Gaetz. In fact, here is Gaetz proposing that no, we shouldn't raise the age limit on guns. In fact, we should have more people with more guns, especially if you're going to go to vote. Take a look.
I sort of like Congressman Massey's legislation that maybe everyone who's a voter or on their way to vote ought to have the opportunity to carry a firearm to ensure that they're not subject to any intimidation.
Intimidation. Barron.
You know, voter intimidation is in fact illegal. You
Yes.
cannot do it. However, it's not a capital offense. It's not something that if you do voter intimidation, you don't get the death penalty for it. So why would you need a gun, right? You can't just kill somebody or shoot them or whatever because of voter intimidation. Not to mention the fact, what was it, a day ago, 2 days ago, Politico came out with that massive report about the Republicans literally planning a massive voter intimidation campaign. They've been holding workshops. They've had Zoom calls. All this is out in the open. I mean, these calls, everything Politico got their hands on. Republicans are trying to stack Democratic precincts with Republican poll workers whose sole job is to intimidate people and harass them into not voting. So if Matt Gaetz has his way, oh my God, that's going to be a lot of dead Republicans because those are the people that literally have a plan to intimidate voters. It's all spelled out. They're not even being secretive about it anymore. So, Matt, careful what you wish for, buddy, because your party is planning a massive voter intimidation scheme come November.
Yeah, I mean, why don't we get the Black Panthers involved or, Antifa? Wouldn't that be good? Wouldn't that be very interesting to see what would happen then? If you have, and again, I think it was Cenk Uygur that made a point on yesterday's TYT show. Where he had talked about, he's like, okay, I've got a plan. If you're going to do this voter intimidation campaign, then we should do a voter intimidation campaign. We should go out to every Republican district and watch them. And then, if they start challenging our voters and they start challenging our votes, then we're going to challenge every single Republican voter's vote. Now, if they do nothing, of course, then, we're not going to do anything. But if they start this, then we should damn well finish it because that is voter intimidation. And they're absolutely trying to come and suppress the vote, suppress Democratic votes so that they can win.
And if Matt Gaetz has his way, that would really just result in massive shootouts, right?
Which they love.
Yeah, I guess the Democrats would have to be shooting at the Republicans. The Republicans would have to be shooting at the Democrats. And then, of course, if you happen to be in a stand your ground state, everybody around who feels threatened, they got to start shooting at both sides. So you just end up with nothing but a bloodbath. And I guess no votes end up getting cast because everybody's dead because everybody has a gun. That's I hate to say that's the future that conservatives want, but it kind of seems like that's the future conservatives want. I mean, here's the thing that gets me. And again, I work with lawyers. I work at a law firm. I do publish a legal magazine, but I am not a lawyer. But I think a very skilled lawyer might be able to argue in favor of gun control just the fact that I brought up earlier about voter intimidation not being a capital offense.
Right.
All of these pro-gun laws, including the stand your ground laws, what do? They make a capital offense out of everything. You're allowed to kill somebody, but by doing so, are you not robbing this person of their right to a trial? Right?
Right.
That's a constitutional right. We have a right to a jury of our peers, right? A trial with a jury of our peers. But you've now violated that person's constitutional right, whether you're a police officer or just some nut job who thinks, hey, cool, somebody's in my backyard, I get to shoot them. Why can we not challenge it on those grounds? Why can we not argue that these bills are unconstitutional because they rob you of a different constitutional right? I mean, that's how they've expanded gun laws in this country, by arguing that certain things violate the Second Amendment. Why is that the only amendment that conservatives give a damn about? I guarantee you none of them could even tell you what's in the Third Amendment. I promise you they couldn't tell you what the Third Amendment is.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, they have not been able to count past two. You know, they only know the first and the second, and really they don't really even know all that much, since they seem to have such a skewed, you know, understanding of both of those amendments. I mean, you could go and talk about how they believe that, you know, that the First Amendment is, you know, a completely, like, unfettered free speech, which to them means I get to call someone the N-word without any consequences. That's what that's what they interpret that to be. And as far as the freedom of religion, also enshrined in the First Amendment, they think that no. That just means that I get to have my religion and lord it over you and use that to control you. That's the First Amendment. Why are you infringing upon my freedom of religion? And again, another skewed reading of the Second Amendment means they can have any weapon that they want, as many weapons as they want, take it anywhere they want. I mean, you know, hey, if I want an RPG, if I want a rocket launcher or tank or landmines, shall not be infringed. Shall not be infringed, Farron. Why
I know,
are you stepping on my liberty?
It is so funny because they always, especially this past week, that's the part, shall not be infringed.
Yep.
Cool. You left out the well-regulated part.
Yep.
I mean, those are the second and third words of that amendment. It's right there at the beginning. I don't know how you even miss that. I could understand if it was at the end and you had only read the part you wanted to and stopped, but it's at the beginning. There's no excuse for that. A well-regulated blah, 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 militia, all that. But they don't want to because they don't need to. Mm-hmm. But here's the thing, and I've mentioned this in multiple interviews, and I'm going to say it here just to make sure that everybody understands this. Most gun control measures, most proposals in this country are supported by more than 80% of the country at large and more than 70% of members of the NRA. The only place where there is any real dissent or debate about gun laws is in legislatures, the federal and the state level. When you get to the general public, more than 80% of us, left, right, center, whatever, we all agree something has to be done. Let's pass these laws. So there is no debate among the American people. It only exists in legislatures and, of course, conservative media. Beyond that, they're the minority. They're the fringe. And we have to start treating them as such. We have to stop acting like this is a debate. And we have to point out that these people are fringe nut jobs that are getting the rest of us killed.
Absolutely. And again, it's sad that we have a system that is conducive to allowing this fringe to control our politics. And of course, that happens because of the outsized influence of money in politics. We live under corporate rule where special interests that have the money, they're able to buy off our politicians. And of course, you also have massively gerrymandered districts where you have conservatives, Republican politicians that are able to choose their voters. So they'll choose the ones who will always be, guaranteed to turn out, which happens to be the most fringiest type of people. Yeah, the ones that are the extremists, that always come out and vote for them in every single election. And they pander to those people, and they take these big checks from not just the NRA, but of course gun manufacturers. And what is it? There are other groups that are actually even more extreme than the NRA on issues, if you can believe it. And so those are the people, that's the fringe that controls our political system these days. And I don't think, and look, I'm super pessimistic that we're going to ever get any sort of gun control passed in this system as it is, because of that fringe, because of that money in politics. We know the problems, and the American people, you're right, absolutely do agree on a lot of these, common sense gun measures. And let me just add too, bring in the fact that because I think the American people know that Congress will not be able to really do anything, that's why we have polls where you have support for one of the few things that might actually, pass, and that's arming teachers. I think Americans, citizens, are at the point of where they know the government's not going to be able to do anything because of these interests, and say, I don't know, fuck it, let's arm the teachers. We got to do something. Maybe that'll work. I don't know. We're desperate for that, for something. And this is where we're at because of our just absolutely broken system.
It is. And without fixing the system, which, look, I have no problem. If we want to abolish the Senate, I'm all for it. I mean, the Senate seems to be what is holding up pretty much everything in this country for many decades now. I'm okay with that going away. We are one of the, I think we're the longest running country that's still under their original constitution too, by the way. We haven't changed anything because, oh my God, a bunch of white guys 250 years ago who never washed their genitals, they told us this is how things have to be, so God says we got to listen to them. No, they were a bunch of old, or actually younger than they should be, racists, right, who would be just absolutely confounded by anything we have today. Jefferson, I believe it was, actually wanted the U.S. Constitution to expire every couple generations, just so they and everybody else that comes after couldn't tie down future generations with our old laws. He was the only one who understood, like, hey, I think things are going to keep changing. So maybe, what's relevant right now in the 1700s, maybe that's not going to work so well in 100 years or 200. But nope, it's absolute. They're the smartest people that ever lived. They're never wrong. You can't change anything. Like, no, we can, folks. And I think it's time for a drastic overhaul of the entire system, from the Supreme Court to the Senate to the presidency. All kinds of things that we could do to catch up to the rest of the world that right now is straight up leaving us in the dust. We're still living in 1776 right now. They're already headed to the future.
Yeah, you bring up a lot of great points about how but how there's a lot of people that deify the founding fathers, when, of course, we know that a lot of them were slave owners. A lot of them had some pretty terrible ideas about women in government. They weren't originally allowed to vote. It was only white landowners that had the ability to vote. And so maybe, I don't know, maybe we shouldn't be deifying people who, as you put it, didn't wash their balls.
Testicles.
Okay. And maybe, I don't know, there are some good ideas, and we keep the ideas that work, we keep the ideas that are good, but actually evolve. Guaranteeing people have, a workers' bill of rights, for example. That's another great idea, where we actually do have rights to, fair pay, health care, things that actually enhance society, as opposed to whatever the hell we're doing now, which certainly is not an enhancement on society.
Well, and conservatives also love to say, well, you can't touch the Second Amendment. It's in the Constitution. It's untouchable. We once had an amendment that said you couldn't sell alcohol in this country.
Exactly.
I think they all forget about prohibition. We in our Constitution said no more alcohol. You guys are cut off. And then we very quickly were like, wait a minute. Ooh, wow.
Bad idea.
Let's write a new one. So, the Constitution can be changed. If we can't just get a new one, we can change things. We can change one amendment with another amendment. We have done it before. We could do it again. We just won't do it.
And you know what? The fact that we can change this is one of the brilliant things that the founders did put in there. So credit where credit is due, because I think, as you had mentioned before, they knew that you were going to need to update these things as the time goes by.
Well, and even they did it with the Bill of Rights, because they realized quickly,
exactly.
like, oh crap, we forgot this whole list over here, guys. Put it in.